Alright, we should start this. Can anyone hear me through this though? If you can, reply in chat. Yes, no. Hold on 1 second. Then we'll start. No? Wait. That's a yes if you could say no. Hold on 1 second. Then we'll start. No? Wait. That's a yes if you could say no. Alright then, let's get this party started. So I'm Josh. So I'm president of ACM right now, currently for this semester at least, and I'm gonna first catch you guys up with what's going on with the club. So you probably got from the past emails that we are gonna go through YouTube streaming and Teams for our future workshops. Most of our events are still gonna happen. It's just gonna be all through a streaming platform like YouTube. We probably expected Zoom, but the only reason why I'm doing this is just easier for us to use multiple cameras if we need to, and multiple screens and all of that fun stuff. Makes it more flexible here. In addition to that, hopefully by this weekend we'll be sending out an email to all of you about the officer positions again that you register. We're a bit lagging that behind, but the email's ready, so we just need to send that out. And of course the hackathon coding competition that's gonna happen during summer, which will give you more up-to-date info about that soon. But we'll let you know more that in a future email. Always keep track of our emails and also our Discord channels, and also sometimes Twitter. We sometimes keep that up to date too, but the other platforms are better for that. So let's get started. And just a quick reminder that we do have the Teams link up. So if you ever get lost, feel free to ask questions here, as well as Teams. Some of our officers are there, so hopefully they're there. And if they are, like there's 4. Let me just show it up here. There's 4 tutoring rooms right here. So 1 is managed by Verna today, 2 is managed by Christian, and 3 would be Chris and Joseph. So if you need any help, feel free to ask them any questions. They should be able to help you too. Alright, let's get started. So what I did here right in front of you is actually a virtual machine. The reason why I did this, so I could walk through the step of installing it, because there's sometimes some challenges to installing it. Like for example, the first step that you need to do is actually install the JDK. But to install the JDK nowadays is that you need to log in you need to make an Oracle account and log in, and then you'll get a JDK for it. In this case, I'm downloading JDK version 8, so let me backtrack a bit. So what I did is I just looked for Java JDK and then version 8 and just hit download. In this case, since I'm logged in, it's gonna probably skip that part at ask. So yeah, it's gonna skip, but it's gonna ask you normally to log in with your Oracle account. It's a requirement now to get that up and running. So once it's done downloading, you can obviously install it like you normally do, but that's a tricky thing. So most Java stuff in the past, you don't need it. You didn't need to log in, but nowadays you need to. So because they're changing the platform a bit and how you get charged and how it's paid nowadays. So you're gonna need the Java JDK. In addition to, you're gonna need the Android Studio itself as an application. Android Studio is a heavy application. That's why I gave myself 8 gigs of RAM in this virtual machine. It's actually quite remarkable that I could still run this virtual machine and stream, because if you look at how much RAM I'm using, there isn't much room in that at all. So let's just use the default directory for this. You don't have to really worry about much for this part of the installation process. The Android Studio part will get a bit trickier near the end after you finish installing it, but I'll show you which part that would be. Alright, so the JDK is installed. So the next one, you need to go to Android Studio. Now Android Studio itself is based from the IntelliJ platform. So it's basically an IDE for Java, if you know what IntelliJ is. But in this case, it's fine-tuned for the use of Android. No, it's not recommended to use a virtual machine. The only reason why I'm doing it so I could do a clean install. Using a virtual machine is the terrible way of doing this. You would probably be better off using native. The only reason why I'm doing a virtual machine is so that I could show you from a clean start, because I already have it set up in my laptop. And after the setup process is done, I'm gonna go back to my actual laptop. Your download time may vary when this part of downloading, because it's almost a gigabyte, and if your internet's pretty slow, this would take a while than my internet speed right now that it's going. Hello, Chris. Oh, that being said, also some of our officers are gonna be live streaming here, other than just workshops. Some of them may do some video game streamings, like some people might do more War Thunder, for example. That's gonna be more impromptu and abrupt, so you may want to subscribe if you're interested in that, but we will see on that. Alright, so we're gonna continue to the installation process. Now for Android, there's 2 languages that you could use. You saw there for a second, Kotlin. Kotlin is a more modern language that you could use. But in this case, we're gonna use Java today. But first today, we're gonna first get you to understand the lay of the land. In other words, understand where everything is on Android. Then we'll try to make a simple app of time permits today as well. So let's start it. So it's pretty easy to install it actually once you have it installed. Java first, but what I'm gonna do in the end is well, usually you don't need to do this. You could do a lot of things at Android Studio. The reason why I'm gonna teach you how to do the other step, which I'll tell you in a bit, is just because if you have an external app, or sometimes you don't want to use Android Studio itself, you just want to use some libraries, you can. So you don't need to do the whole thing. Actually, I'm going to do a custom install in this case. You don't have to do custom, but the reason why I do the custom is this: I'm going to make sure everything is going to be in the right place. So this is the one for those of you who don't have an Android device, you could use what's called a virtual device. This is basically a virtual machine that you could use to run Android. That being said, I'm gonna install this just to go through the process, but again, to reiterate, don't do this in a virtual machine. Try to do this in an actual local machine device that you have on your computer. So I'm gonna do 2 gigs of RAM in this case. I have 8 gigs set up for this virtual machine, I'm just gonna make sure that is correct. So you gotta be careful with the how much RAM you assign it because it's gonna eat up a lot. So yeah, I have it set up as 8, but you gotta have to be careful with what RAM you have on your device. Probably you should use about a quarter or an eighth of your RAM for the virtual machine, but keep in mind it is pretty heavy of an emulator. And for the most part, a lot of people have been telling me that it only works with Intel right now. So if you have an AMD processor, you currently sort of on luck, but there is other emulators out there that you could use because you could always package this as an APK and then just upload it to that emulator and then run it and install that emulator and use an APK for that. So I'm gonna hit next for 2 gigs, verify everything it's installed. Now you can always change later which emulator you have. This in this case this is platform 29, which is also known as Android 10. Each version of Android has its own API level, but in this case platform 29 is being used, and it's gonna be about 2 gigs, so we'll see how long this takes. By the way, anyone having hard time seeing anything? Because I am only streaming at 720p because not the best upload speeds in my house. So this is usually the long part because you're downloading a full OS from Android as well as other libraries that you need for basic Android development. And if you have not as good internet as I do for download, you can have even longer wait times. So keep that in mind. This part usually takes a while. Feel free to ask any questions if you have any as well. So this is the error that you probably won't get. Yes. So if you're using an AMD processor, for the most part, the virtual machine won't work. There are workarounds, and AMD is currently working on and Android is working on an alternate solution for AMD based processor. So like in my case, mine failed because in my case the problem was that I'm running within a virtual machine, so that doesn't work with running a VM within a VM. But if you're using an AMD based processor, it usually doesn't work at all just because it doesn't have the components. Now, if you Google around, there are a beta. I think it's an early beta or early alpha that you could use an AMD based processor, but its stability it's a maybe. So that's not 100% path you could take. The other paths would be like there's other, I think BlueStack and other emulators. I forgot there's one more, but I don't remember it off the top of my head that you could use. That being said, the most preferred way for Android development, anyway, for the most part, is using an actual device, just because of the latency and the testing equipment makes it easier to do it on physical hardware. That being said, if you're doing automated UI testing, doing it in emulator isn't a bad thing. But if you really need to like utilize camera sensors, your fingerprint reader, and all of that other sensors, that you would probably want to use a physical device for. Alright, so here comes the part that if you have a Mac, you can have a bit different of an experience. If you have Linux, you have a different experience. So if Christian, if you're here, you're about to have a lot of people asking you for help for a sec, because I'm running it on Windows. But the idea is that you need to add an environment variable to your OS so that you could access some command line tools through your command line that you have. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna find my environment variables, and I have a what's called path here. So there's other stuff here that's already in there. What I need to add is the Android path, so I'm gonna quickly find that. Usually the Android side is pretty common on where it's located, so it'll be in PC, then desktop C, I believe it's in this, then Android. Actually don't think it's in here. For 1 second, let me check my own one, because I don't remember it on top of my head, but it's pretty much the same for Windows. It is pretty much similar on iOS and as well. So it's in your users app data. So in this case, my app data is hidden. So you encounter this issue as well on Mac. On Mac, I believe you do command dot or dot command, one of those two, it will show you the hidden file. For PC, you could just click hidden items and it's just pop up here. And then platform tools. And we'll just copy that link and new. Let's cancel on that first. Edit, new, paste it in, and then hit OK, and then OK. Now to test if this even worked, just to command prompt, and then ADB devices. Well, just do ADB first. So it worked. So what does ADB allows you to do? Well, let me connect my own phone to my own PC, and then we'll take it from there. Anyone have any questions so far before we continue more deeply into this conversation? All right, let me unplug some stuff here. And if you have issues that you still can't solve, feel free to talk to them individually as well, to our officers in the Teams channel, and then you could screen share to them and then they could try helping you. So I'm gonna switch back to my actual machine. So let's show you what ADB does. So let's do ADB. There's a lot of things you could do with ADB. You could kill an app, start a server, all that fun stuff. But to verify if you have a device connected, you could do what's called ADB devices. What's gonna do is gonna search your entire system for a attached Android device, and then it'll be over there and it sees it right there. Of course, there's some prerequisites that you need to do first. One of those things is that you need to enable debugger mode on your device. Don't have a device currently that's not debugged right now, but the way to turn it on is that you need just to find your build version and then tap it about 10 times, and then a new menu will pop up in your settings page. And then if you scroll down and click on it, there should be called USB debugging. Make sure you have that on. I could actually show you that part. Give me 1 second. So see, that's up. That's good. Alright. Alright, hopefully you guys could see that. Alright, so this is my phone is a Galaxy S8, so you could see there's a settings page there. So what you first need to do is go to your about phone, and then you need to find your software version and then build version. If you double click that enough times, that pop in the bottom will appear. My case developer mode is already on, so that's already there. By the way, this is only for if you have a physical device. If you have an emulator, you don't need to do this, it's already done for you. So if you have a physical device, make sure you turn that on, and then you'll have developer mode at the very bottom normally. Once you do that, make sure you turn it on, and then turn on USB debugging. Now, a lot of apps, actually published apps, would hate you to do this. It'll tell you, hey, you have USB debugging on, you should probably turn it off. For your case, it's fine for now, but make sure you keep that in check. Some apps won't run, or some apps would, even if you play a game on it, would consider you will think that you're cheating because you have USB debugger on. So you gotta be mindful with that. Alright, so what can you do with ADB? So one of the things that you could do is actually, if you have an APK, you could immediately install stuff through it. So ADB install whatever name .apk will immediately install that. So other commands is that if you use -r, don't quite remember it's before or after, but if you do -r, it will allow you to reinstall an app that you installed through an APK. Another one is that you probably don't know is that your phone does have a command line prompt. So if you turn on ADB shell, you actually just activated the command line function on your phone. So if I ls, you can see everything that's in your phone. There's a lot of things that's usually denied, but if you really want to go to your data, what it's usually is in cd, and I believe it's mount. Nope, that's not it. cd, is it bin? Well, I don't quite remember on top of my head, but oh, there it is, data. cd data, then permission denied, cd. There is an entire thing spill that you could do. I think cd 0. There's an entire spill of how you could access your data in your phone. Usually it's through like cd data and then 0, then emulated 0. So let's see, cd data, cd emulated. So yeah, I'm not remembering on top of my head, but you could normally access that. Or is it in storage actually? So there you go. So cd emulated, and if you do ls there, it says permission denied, but there's a hidden one, it's called 0. If you go to 0 ls, there you go, you found your file system that you have in your local files. So you could access files through here, move it over there. So if you have like a Android smartwatch instead, you could actually get your data through here and then export it to your device, to your machine. either PC or Mac. You should be able to do this on both Mac or Windows or any platform that has ADB inside. So actually we are now done with the emulator because we're now gonna do the fun part. Let's open the app. So I'm gonna shut this emulator down. Let me close all this stuff. Anyone have any questions so far yet? Hope you guys are keeping up. So what's next for us is I'm gonna open up Android Studio. This version of mine is actually a bit older than the one you just probably installed. That's why it looks a bit different. So what I'm going to do is first, I'm gonna open a new project, but I'm also gonna open an old project. So give me a second. So I'm gonna open that. So there might be a bit of spoilers for a second, but it's fine. You can learn it again anyway. So I'm gonna put that aside for a second. Okay, so when you actually start your project, what usually pops up is this window. So what are we gonna do is we're gonna choose empty activity for the simplicity, but you could find any other templates that you want. You could even code it in C++ if your heart desires. You could also have other platforms as well that you could use. Some of them includes Wear OS, Android Wear. It's just renamed to Wear OS. Android TV, don't know how many people use that these days. Android Auto for your car dashboards that you have that support it, and Android things, which usually is like pretty much like your IoT running on Android. So let's go through a phone. So you can name it whatever you want. I'm gonna change this folder to something new so that it doesn't overwrite another project. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a folder called ACM CSUN tutorial, and let's use that as our file. Then I'll just say tutorial. Now this is where you could choose your language. You can choose Java or Kotlin. Now this is the more important part. This is where the major flaw of Android comes through. So unlike iOS, Android, you would normally have an issue with what's called fragmentation. A lot of different mobile devices have different versions of Android. So like for example, if you're an S8, you're stuck at 9.0, S7, you're stuck at 8.0, and etc. So each of them are usually stuck in different variants of Android. They're not kept up to base, unlike iOS. iOS handles this much better in terms of fragmentation. That being said, it's not completely clean slate because there's older devices that are way too old to be updated. They aren't going to support new APIs. That being said, at least they have a good long life, 2 to 3 years life cycle, so they usually get supported pretty longer these days. And if you need to see it more, here's a distribution of the different Android APIs. So if you notice, remember I said earlier 29 is 10, so there should be a spot here. They're not showing it here, but 9.0 was 28, then 29 is Android 10. There is a surprising a lot of devices that you may not know that actually uses Android. One of them is actually a VR headset called the Oculus Quest that also uses Android. I believe is built part of Android 7 Nougat. But as you can see here, the higher you go with each Android version, the less people use it. So you gotta keep that in mind when you're developing. A lot of people use 6 because 62%, but keep in mind that's about 3 to 4 years old. So that's pretty old if you want some of the latest and greatest APIs. So you gotta keep that in mind as well. In addition to some, if you're using a game engine like Unity or Unreal, you gotta be careful what's called your OS level that you're supporting, the compiled OS. So you gotta choose a 32-bit compilation or a 64-bit compilation of your app, which can differ between each OS or per device. So you gotta know your target market and who you're targeting. And you can see here it specifies in this, at least on 8, you could specify what the changes are between each OS, like so you could tell which feature that you really need and you're willing to sacrifice to support more people. Like if you wanted multi-window support, you can't go to 6. It's not there. And if you want fingerprint reading support, it's not natively there on Android below that. So you gotta be careful as you read through this. In our case, let's use the default 8.0 and we'll start from that. And then I'll hit finish. What's gonna pop up is this pretty much blank page. So it's loading Gradle, and what Gradle is basically is your package manager. If you've used npm or JS Node, this is basically what it is. So Gradle is pretty much downloading your external libraries that you have. In this case, stock libraries that comes with Android Studio that's pre-built. You can always add stuff, remove stuff, JUnit for testing, and the newer framework called Android X as well. Now what just popped up in front of me here is what's called the main activity. You could think of this, if you're really new to Java, as your main method, main class as well. Create is usually what creates your scene. There is an entire thing on MVC. MVC is called Model View Controller. There's a lot of different cases from on create, on pause, on start, and on restart, which explains pretty much the life cycle of an Android device. You won't get too detailed into that today, but that is an idea that you should look into a bit to understand how at least Android works. iOS also uses this framework, and also even React Native. However, they all work slightly differently between each devices, so you gotta watch out for that. And then the other thing, you might be wondering, where's the UI or GUI that you need to do? Well, you could do that all in what's called layout. Layout, it's basically your XML. And I'm sorry if you guys are asking questions in chat and I'm not seeing it because there's a giant window in front of me. So let's go. So yes, like I said earlier, this is basically IntelliJ. It is exactly the same, but you answer your question, you technically can, but there might be a lot of dependencies that you'll be missing if you straight out install IntelliJ, just regular IntelliJ. That's because this is pretty much a modified form of it. For example, if you try to open a Java file, it will work here because it's more of an extension of IntelliJ. But if you really want to make at least native Android apps, you would probably want to use this. What it used to be, actually, used to be Eclipse as their platform of choice. It wasn't IntelliJ, but nowadays it's IntelliJ. IntelliJ is a bit heavy on the performance side, so you gotta watch out for that. Let me close this. Okay, so there's two ways to make your UI. You could either do it through your drag and drop style, through what's called a designer. You could do this also, and it looks good. You could just add a button here if you want, and then it's just gonna give you errors because you're missing constraints. You could change the layout. You could change to what we usually like, what's called relative layout, and change that with constraints because we feel like that better, and then realign it ourselves like that, and then use relative layout instead. And then we could use grid view on top of it too. You could do all that there. You could, and let's undo some stuff. Okay, so let's go back to Hello World. So these are usually referenced in variables inside your XML. If I click on this, you can see your right hand side, which contains all the attributes, including layout width, wrap content, parent, and the text hello world that you could alter in your JavaScript. Your Java code, Java code. And then you can change your color, style, presets, and all of that. Clickable if it's a button or not. and all of this. You can change all of this if you want, or if you really don't like the GUI and you really want to use the actual XML code, you could use what's called text. So text is pretty much the raw XML code. So you could pretty much do it manually if you don't like working on this format and these attributes file. In addition to this, you have these versions of APIs that you can use, 28 and 28. You could have more. You have to modify that in your Gradle as well as your Android Studio's own package, and that's part of it. Now, how do you test it? Well, in my case, I have a device plugged in, so it's seeing this, but I also have these other emulators here. But how do you make an emulator? So what you do is you can open what's called AVD, Android Virtual Device. So you could have multiple different devices here, and you could pretty much make any virtual device you want. So each of these have different screen sizes, so you could test many different sizes. You could clone a device if you want, and then you could have most of these. This used to be only Nexus devices. Nowadays there's Pixels in these sets because Pixel's the new thing. So what you could do is hit next if you want to choose this one, but let me just talk about a few things before we go on. So number one is the Play Store support. Some applications that you make may have a dependency with the Play Store. An example for that is AR Core. AR Core is an AR toolkit for Android, but that relies on having the latest version of AR Core, and that would require the user end, including your emulator, have the Play Store to have it updated properly. Or maybe something like Google Maps. They're using Google Maps API which sometimes require the Google Play Store. This is why you need to choose between these, but sometimes you don't need it, so you have the option to not test it or use it at all, and it makes it better, and it becomes dependent from the Play Store. And then you also have these other devices that you can also test. You can also test tablets, which isn't really an Android thing anymore. It's sort of died off, but you could still test that on tablets on Android. Wear OS, which is your smartwatches that you could test, and again phone and TV. The other things, of course, is screen size. How big is this screen size? They even have foldables for like your Google Fold and all that to test. Resolution and DPI, which is sort of important for UI. If you do it wrong, some phones would be stretched, some would be outside your view frame, some of it will be too small. So DPI is pretty important to know as well and keep track. So I'm just gonna do a Pixel 3a here, and then I have 3 different ones here installed. You probably have only 29. Feel free to choose each other ones as well if you have this set up properly. Like I said earlier, if you have AMD or running it in a virtual machine, this won't work at all. So try to use it natively, and currently it's only Intel. But you should be an option, hopefully coming soon, for AMD users to be able to use AMD as well. So right now I'll just make an Android Pie or Android Oreo. Actually, I'll make Oreo. So the thing with Android as well, you don't want to make the app for the latest and greatest unless you're planning for a really, really long launch, like 2 to 3 years, then you would want to use the latest. Just because of, if you saw the graph earlier, actually it's here too, it takes a while for people to keep up. For example, Android 8 came out 2 years ago, it's only 1%. So you gotta be careful on which OS you use, which one you're targeting, because in a few years it will catch up, but a majority of them is like several years behind. So you gotta keep in mind in that as well. So portrait landscape, you could change that, change how it goes up. And Android x86 is your laptop processor. It's gonna run an emulator on that. And I'm just gonna name this the ACM here so I know which one's which. I'm gonna hit finish. And to put it up, you could just hit play here. Alright, so here's your emulator. We notice it works and functions exactly like an Android device. You could swipe left, you could swipe right, and etc. And you have all your other apps here. You have a camera which opens up into a virtual space. Sure. And you have a virtual space here that you can control with your arrow or WASD. I don't quite remember how you control this, but you can take a picture like a regular camera and then open your photo gallery. So you can simulate a lot of stuff through here. Another thing that you can do is change your sensors. So you could simulate a phone call, for example. Let's call the device. So you could do that. You could send a text message here as well. Then you can have change your camera, fake battery. Gotta be careful if it goes 0%, it actually shuts the phone off. Directional pad, microphone, fingerprint, so you can simulate a fingerprint. Virtual sensor, so this accelerometer or gyroscope that you can simulate. Bug report is more like for you to tell. Well, bug report actually you could use this to see what went wrong. Snapshots, you could record, and then Google Play services, of course. And then this is basically an actual phone. Like an actual phone, you have your own settings. Like I told you, your debugger. Again, this should be on. It might not be on, so let's see. System updates, you can update that too. Let's not do that. So if I do that, if I click that, yeah, that's when Android had secret stuff. Like most Android prior to Android 8, I believe. I don't think 9 has it. There always used to be what's called an Easter egg, and I believe 8 was octopus. I don't quite remember. Yeah. So 8 was octopus. This came out in 2017, so we are into that. So what other things you could do? You could actually, you also have internet access here as well. So you could even browse the web in your emulator if you want. So let's go to our channel right now. Let's see if it works. I don't think it is, but I might be wrong. Nah, we're not popular enough to populate. Oh, okay. Populate the search browser yet. But that gives you an idea what you can do with the emulator as well. And actually, if you have the command line tool, like I talked earlier, this would be considered a device as well. So let me unplug my actual phone, and I could hit ADB devices. It's gonna see that as an emulator. I can do the exact same thing as well here, and then ADB shell and an OS and all that fun stuff too. CD, storage, data, 0, emulated. I might be wrong. There you go, emulated. My bad. There you go. So you have access to your file system through there as well. So let's actually try to run this app right here in our emulator. So let's close the emulator first so you can see it from scratch. So you can either shut it down or what's called a cold state. So I'm gonna just shut it down, and then you'll see a fresh boot up and fresh shutdown. Then we'll do it again with a cold start. Oh, whoops, that's the wrong one. Well, you'll see the cold starts first then. Right, I forgot this emulator is broken. Let's do the other one. This is way too old. Well, this is a cold start, so you'll see the cold start here. But notice it's a lower level API, so it wouldn't work here because our current target is API level 28. So let's close that and open our ACM one. Which probably didn't work either because it's probably too low either. We'll see. for it. There you go. Interesting detail. But anyway, so that's and basic way to boot up your app, and you can shut it down just hitting pause and then closing your emulator here. Alright, so let's start with trying to make one app. So let's see if I could open this. Alright, this opened wrongly, so let me open that again. Make sure I didn't break this by accident. So the idea of this app is just basically simple. You just click the button on the screen and then it should auto generate a brand new text. So just make sure it still works. Alright, this still works. Alright, that's good. So we're gonna use this as our inspiration. So like we talked earlier, there's any different layouts you can do as your base. We could use constraints, or we could use some older layouts like relative layout. Most of us like using what's called linear layout. Linear layout that makes it easier for us to control some things. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just replace this, delete that, delete that, with the linear layout vertical. In this case, it's actually probably easier to just change it here, raw code. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna swap that out with linear layout. There you go. So now it's in linear layout. Vertically aligned makes it a bit easier. So what are we gonna put there? Let's just put a giant button for a second. Notice it's aligned to the top. You can always add some containers and spaces above it too to make it easier for you. So I'm gonna add a space. Wrong space. Delete that for a sec. Let's actually put a frame first of some kind. Yeah. Oh, no wonder. That's the wrong linear layout. That should be vertical layout. So undo that for a sec. See, I could do to fix this for a sec, because currently the problem is for now is that this is actually a horizontal layout. So what we could do is change the characteristics. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna delete this again. Then I'm gonna change this back to linear layout. Let me undo all the changes we have. And then I'm gonna add another attribute to this, and then Android orientation vertical. No, it's vertical. There you go, where we want it. Again, we're gonna change that to a button. Should I add a space? Might not just add a space. That's fine. We'll just leave the button up there. Let's just make sure that we can even press it. Good. We have a pressable button. So now if you notice the button 3, you could change the ID here, you could match width, height. You could adjust the text size here if you want to make it bigger. 15 SP spacing. If you want to do that, you can. You can also change the height and width of the, currently says match parent match height. You can always change that as well. And what's complaining right now is that I believe it's missing constraints. Oh, there you go. Never mind. It's not using what's called a string resource. A string resource, it's usually stored in your XML as well. That contains a list of all strings that you call. That usually works. Not in this XML, I believe in a different XML, which should be here. There you go. And strings here. What this does is that if you were at, oh, I spelled tutorial wrong. Oh well. If you were to let's turn these notifications, silence them. Okay, which you could usually use it for different countries. If you have different resources, you could have it per basis on each region. It makes it easier for you to migrate and localize your app to different regions on the world. So now we have that. So we have a button now, right? So there's two ways what you could do. You can modify some things through an XML. In some cases, you could do a lot of that, but in some cases, it depends on your choice. It's pretty much subjective, but a lot of people usually like doing it in XML normally, but some cases you could do it in a project as well. Okay, so let's put it up. See for a sec. There. That's unit testing. So yes, you could also do unit testing here as well. That would allow you to test your app. So if you go to test, I believe it's here as well. Build config. So you could have unit testing here. This is an example. If I were to run this, it's gonna check if it's 4 plus 4 equals 2 or not. So I could just run this addition. It's gonna do a quick check, and then yeah, it passed. So there's a lot of this built in. If you do Xcode, you have this too, but it's called XCTest. Just jumping to iOS a bit, you do have all of this also built in as well. Most of these are similar to iOS, just the language and the way it's formatted and a bit on how it's built. But the IDE itself runs very similarly to each other. So let's see what we can do with the scripts. I'm gonna make it super simple, so we won't make it too complicated. So what we're gonna do is that we're gonna have a string that could have some kind of so I'm gonna just make a public variable. Most of these are not prioritizing on security or any of that, so I'm probably just gonna not really talk about much of OOP today, but OOP would certainly help in a lot of things in this application. So the first to tell you about what does onCreate does. onCreate pretty much tells the MVC controller, tell it what do you do when we start. What do we do when we just start the app itself? Now, if you notice, we have r.layout activity main. R dot basically itself contains a lot of your variables that you set, or IDs rather, in your XML file that you can access through that function basically. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to access my button. Alt enter to import that in. Now this part is optional. Newer Androids that don't require a cast, but some older ones do. So if you want to be safe, you could do it. Now let's look what we ID'd our button. Let's go back to our XML. So we gave our button an ID of button 3. So we'll just use that. Copy that over. So how do we call it? So we just call it r dot id dot button 3. Great. So let's add a button listener to this. So you could use lambda functions doing this too, but I'm going to use some kind of concatenation. No, not concatenation, but some kind of in object call, so I don't have to do it all at once, and you could configure it pretty easily. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say button dot set on click listener. Then I'll do new view dot, see if that's already done for us. There you go. Perfect. So that's already overrides a function for me, and then I could make anything I want from here. So for example, if I want to do a print statement on this, for example, log the, let's import log first. Log.d hello world, and then I'll just put some content here. I'll just instantiate this with something here for now. Then I'll just put output. Now if I run this, see if this even, let's kill the app first, stop all, because we don't know which is which anymore. Then let's okay, now I know what's going on. It's stuck, so you gotta be careful which one you're gonna run. Currently it's running the test, so let's kill that and run the actual app. So your debug logs would normally run over here. So if I hit button, should be in logcat actually. It's usually a lot of stuff happening here, so it's sometimes hard to find. That's why a lot of people uses what they call toast to be able to find it. Currently I can't find it, so it might be here. Oh, and you probably get that sometimes. Let me just put it here so you can actually just see it, so you know. Or it would put and make sure that actually does work. Okay. Well, normally it will show up here. I'm not sure why it's not showing up today. But normally you just be careful with these different assertion, error, warning, debug. You could have several of them that could be working on. Depends on which flag you put here. So there's several flags if you control click. There's D for debug, you have V for verbose, and you can choose any of these that fits your needs. You just need to read the doc, what they're for, and that's that. Let's kill that for now. Why is the test unit keeps running? Never should have run that. Anyway. Anyway, let's ignore that for now. The more important thing is that we gotta make sure we can modify the actual text file. So that's the button itself. That's the button listener for that. This is optional. You could actually erase that and it'd still be fine. But on older applications, you would need that. So keep that in mind, like I said earlier. So what we're gonna do next is that we're gonna set the text on that button. So let's just change that. Let's change this. Oops. Let's change this to something more meaningful. So what we're gonna do is button dot set text, and then let's just call it hello. So let's comment this out for now. Oh, that's why this keeps running. There's multiple of them running. Alright. See, changes it to hello. So this is one way to change text. So you could change it pretty much any attribute you want from a button. Button dot set. Or let's just open control click that and you'll see the access modifiers. Oh, you can't. Alright. Some of the things you could do, you get a pen autofill. You could even change some XML elements through here too, debug. And a button, as you know, is an event, so you could pretty much do this pretty easily. You could find an ID inside of it because there's usually you could XML, so you could put nested objects inside of things. And yeah, so let's make something more meaningful. Let's add something in our contents. So let's actually add a new string size. Now you don't normally the preferred way is you don't modify strings here. You can modify here, but for the most part you would have a list of your different types of string in your XML values like we showed earlier. That includes like your colors, so the colors of your GUI, to your strings and your styles that you may have. So let's all right, let's do this. So string contents. Okay, so if you do contents, I'm not going to put that many strings, so keep that in mind. I'm just going to put 3. Keep in mind this is sort of hard coding, so you could probably make this more dynamic than it is. Apple, banana, and I'm going to add a random generating function outside this, in which it will return a string. Okay. Probably need to import random, but that's fine. Oops. And then let's pass actually an int length of the array, then length equals to random dot next int length, then -1 because we don't want to get out of bound error. And then should be it, since we're gonna just return an int. Let's change that back to an int, and then return. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna replace this contents, then the length of the contents, so contents dot length. So let's see what we got. Well, now you know you don't need that -1 down because it's not getting the last one. There you go. So now you can make your random generating text button as in here. Now you may not noticing where is this coming from. That's coming from, again, your strings XML, because it's you're registering an app name over there. You could, that will be basically your app name. If you go down here, we get home, you'll be seeing it all right here. In addition to that, there's some cases that you want to lower your Android version. So what you need to do is go to your Gradle version and lower this, and then this as well. So you gotta be careful with that. Usually 0.02 is fine, but I'll recommend you. There's a minimum target, and then the target SDK that you're looking for. So if you need to lower it down, you could do it through here or through the settings in IntelliJ, and you could switch. And let's see one more thing. So what I'm gonna do next is something I'm not sure if it's road legal or is trying to load up an APK. So what you could do is you could actually mount up an APK into your emulator. See if I have an if I could make a build an APK. There you go, build APKs. Not sure where this is actually gonna go. Alright, found the APK. See if this works or not. So what you could do, let me uninstall this for a sec. For emulators, you could just drag and drop it, an APK, and it automatically installs it. Let's close over this too. You could also do it through the command line, which I'll show you for a second here. Actually, let's do it through the command line. Like I said, you could access your command line, even your remote, your virtual machine through the command line. So what I'm gonna do is ADB devices to confirm that your device is in ADB. And then what I could do is ADB install -r, and then, well, actually, let's first navigate to the right directory first. If you're a Mac or Linux, it'll be ls, then dir. So what I'm going to do is adb install -r the app -debug.apk. So the -r flag makes you reinstall the app. So I'm going to hit that. It's going to stream, and it's done. And there you go. Now, what if you want to uninstall it through the command line? You can also do that too, but you need to know your actual app name. So this is the APK name, but there is actually an app name. So if I do, let's see, it's probably gonna just say I need to know my actual name for that, which is IDB com dot, in this case my name, you could look at it through your Java file, but there's a better probably way to look at that, but com dot dot tutorial. Oh, it's misspelled tutorial, so tutorial. And that uninstalls it from your device through the command line. So this is useful for some devices that somehow in your settings it's missing the uninstall button. That has happened before, and you could do that through the command line. Now you could also install it like we said without a -r, install app debug.apk, and you can install it back over there as well. That's why the ADB is useful, because you could do a lot of things. You could control your phone a lot. You could even technically do a screen share through ADB as well, Android development bridge, which allows you to do a lot of stuff, and it's pretty much on all devices that's based on Android. You could do a lot of things with ADB. That's why I show you guys how to do it. It makes just a lot of things easier on installing and uninstalling stuff sometimes. And that's it for ADBs. And let's see, one more. Yeah, no. So yes, like I showed you earlier, the other way, you can also, once again, repeating myself sort of, but that's fine, install it through here. Like I said earlier, the Play Store is installed. So the Play Store also lets you install all these other Google apps that you have here, which if you have APIs that depend on it, you would need the Play Store one, the variant for that. So you could have all of this stuff too. And actually, there's still some missing dependencies. Another day there, I was trying to install AirCore and it's missing that. And you can always download it from the Play Store, but then you're gonna have to install, to sign in and make it your virtual phone. But it's up to you if you want to do that or not. See what else left that we could cover. So if you want to change your pictures, you could also do it here as well. If you hit new, let's see, image asset, you could change this with something else and then apply that as your new image. So what I'm going to do is, let's change this image to, let's see, let's go to my downloads folder. Let's can copy that link to that. Let's see if I could find it. Dude, it's long. That might, that there. .png. Doesn't seem like that's gonna work. Oh, that's the wrong path. Ah, I see now. Okay. Well, that's the idea. At least you need to, what you need to do is actually put the file first as a clip in your files in your local system, in the directory I mean, and then you can start modifying because it's looking for an XML file. That's fine, but that's the idea. If you want to do changes, you could do it here as well. Let me just check my other project, because I believe that was the thing to do, but let me just check something if it does pop up eventually, and then we'll wrap it up from there. Yeah, so we need to put in resources. That's why I don't have any resources. And then I could have set it up as an image. That's fine. It's a bit messy on this end, but I'll show you the idea. So the idea is you would put it on the resources here, and then you could manipulate that through here as well. So normally you would put all your images in your resource folder and then just apply it to be your actual image, icon image over here in your resource folder rather than your external folder. And then once you put it up, you have it in, as your icon. So your settings, there was some glitches with this as well. Some cases that it won't show. Yeah, this one broke, whatever, it's fine. But that's the idea on that. So that pretty much wraps up this tutorial, unless you guys have something more specific you want to do. First off, any questions you guys have left? If any of you remaining, it looks like a lot of it are the officers are here. Which, thank you officers for being here, even retired officers. Which we should have a meeting after this too, by the way, in Teams. I know I didn't tell you guys that before, but we are. Alright, if there's not any more questions or any more concerns, I'll end this workshop. But if you guys have any questions, feel free to comment. Not sure if you're gonna read comments. Christian, since you're webmaster, you'll be in charge. Or Joseph. No, Chris, you'll be in charge. You're our PR. So you'll be monitoring the comment section of this. Anyway, we'll talk about that more later in our little meeting for officers. But the rest of you guys be safe out there. We'll have more workshops. If things go as planned, the next one should be in about 2 weeks. It should hopefully be Arduino workshop. We're still working on that because it's a bit harder because we were planning it to be more interactive on that. But we'll email you guys that as well, and then we'll post it on Discord and send an email as well to that. And this should be recorded, but it's gonna take a while. It's gonna take about 24 hours to go through. But feel free to ask us any questions on this. This will be recorded. This will also, comments should be open as well, but keep it civil down there. We don't want to start turning off comments or kicking people off just because they're doing the same things. But other than that, have a great rest of your night, everyone. And check your emails. If you want to subscribe, go ahead. Bye.